Hello, everyone. My name is Katherine Kreidler with the National Sports Media, and today I'm joined by Mike McFeely, our 2024 Sports National Sports Media Award winner. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, glad to be here.
And first of all, congratulations on winning. And what was your reaction when you won?
I was very excited. I've been doing this
Hmm.
a long, long time. I think I am in my, gosh, it has to be close to 40 years now here at the Forum over the years, and I had not won it prior to this year, so it's something very exciting for me.
That's awesome. Could you give us a little backstory on how you first got interested in sports and then like your journey to where you are now?
Sure, I think I was your typical um, sports geek growing up.
Hmm.
Played all the sports. I'm old enough that back in the day, baseball was still the biggest national pastime back then. And so I played baseball and basketball and hockey and all of those things growing up.
Hmm.
And just sort of kind of kept on doing that up through junior high school or middle school, I guess we call it now, and all through high school, and ended up playing a little bit of college golf at what was then called Morehead State University. And just sort of got into the profession, becoming a sports writer and a newspaper guy just by the fact that I love to read and I love to write when I was a kid. And my dad actually worked at a newspaper in Minneapolis. And
Okay.
so I had exposure to newspapers every day growing up. And I read the sports sections and read the comics, of course, and the news a little bit and did all those things. And when it came time to decide what I wanted to do with my life, it seemed pretty natural to me to I loved sports and I loved to read and write. And so I found a way to combine the two things. And I'm still doing that 40 some years later.
That's awesome. What college did you go to?
Went to what was then called Morehead State University in Minnesota. It's
Okay.
now called
Okay.
Minnesota State University Morehead. It's a smaller state school right across the Red River from Fargo, North Dakota. And so we're in a
Hmm.
community here with three universities and colleges. And so it's a lot of stuff going on, a bunch of high schools, three colleges, all with sports teams. And so it's been a great place to go to school and sort of get into the profession.
Was that close to Creighton at all?
No, no,
No.
we're
Okay. Okay.
we're no we are
Okay.
Fargo Moorhead is about 3 to 4 hours northwest of the Twin Cities. So we're
Oh, okay.
way up in northwestern Minnesota on the eastern North Dakota border, a couple hours from Canada. And so as we record this, it's all
Gotcha.
the way up to 9 degrees today, which is incredibly warm for us
Oh
because
my gosh.
it's been below zero here for like 3 straight weeks. And
Jeez.
so it's a cold place, but it's a very it's actually Fargo Moorhead's a pretty dynamic community with a lot of things going on, and it's just that we're frozen for 5 months out of the year. But other than that, it's great.
Yeah, my housemate, she's from Minneapolis, and
Oh,
she's told me how growing up Halloween it was always snowing. And I'm from
yes.
Cincinnati, and I'm like, that's not normal for me. So wow.
Are you a Skyline Chili fan?
Oh, I love Skyline.
Yes, that'll add a
Yes,
girl. All right,
huge
perfect.
fan.
You are a young lady after my heart. Then we don't have it
Yes.
up here, but I discovered it in Southwest Florida in the Naples Fort Myers area.
Yeah, they
And in
have a
fact,
location.
my brother-in-law just sent me a photo. I turned him on to it, and he just sent me a photo the other day of he was having dinner at Skyline Chili. So I'm jealous that you are from Cincinnati and know all about that. So that's
Oh
great.
my gosh, I love it. It's so good. And Graders too. Have you had Graders ice
I have
cream?
not. No.
Oh
Oh
my
no.
gosh. It's like 150 years old, like company. It's really good ice cream. Anyway, I feel like we're getting a little off topic.
We're getting away from the topic at hand.
Yeah. Um, what was your first job post grad? And I guess any struggles that you had like early on in your career?
Sure. Postgraduate, my first job was at in Alexandria, Minnesota, which is actually my hometown where I graduated from high school.
Okay.
And it's about an hour and a half or 2 hours away here from Fargo Moorhead. And it still is. It's still a twice weekly paper. And I worked there for the princely sum of $12,000 a year. I'll say that. I've said that very publicly. And it was a great learning experience.
Hmm.
But it had its limitations because it's a smaller publication twice weekly, and I think a lot of people, and maybe still do, expect weekly newspaper people to be always very positive and always very cheerleading for the home team and promoting the home teams. And my personality, even as a young guy, wasn't always like that, and that continues today in my job as a columnist. And so that was one of the challenges, was sort of remembering where I was and remembering that I was covering high school kids who were actually at the time only a few years younger than I was.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's a challenge, but it was a great learning experience. And it gave me the opportunity to do all kinds of things. You had to shoot photographs, you had to write the stories, you had to lay out the pages. In
Hmm.
some cases, I had to deliver the papers.
Oh, wow.
And so it teaches you every aspect of the business, and you meet a lot of people and have to deal with a lot of different people. And that was a great learning experience for me.
Hmm. And then from there, where did you go?
I went to a small daily in Owatonna, Minnesota, which is south of
Okay.
the Twin Cities, and that was a desk job. Copy editor, and copy editors at smaller papers, of course, not only edit copy but write headlines and decide on which photographs to use and edit stories and make decisions on what stories to run. And so I did that at the Owatonna People's Press. And I think, if I recall correctly, that was about a 7,000 circulation daily newspaper.
Oh, wow.
And so it kind of gave me experience in the daily grind, which I had because I interned at the Forum here, where still work today. When I was in
Okay.
college, I interned at the Forum and got all the experience in actually doing the job. And so that sort of translated into my early career. And after Owatonna, I actually came back here for a full-time job and worked my way all the way up to $17,000 a year from the $12,000 a year that I started at. But that was, again, great experience as a young person, because I was writing headlines, I was answering phones, I was covering games on occasion, I was
Mhm.
selecting photographs, I was working with other writers, was working with photographers, was working with the back shop guys to lay out the paper, and putting out 4 editions a day on deadline was just terrific experience in every aspect of the profession. And being old as I am now, it's such a different world now. I mean, it's just a completely different world in the newspaper business than when I started. I don't know if those things are still happening out there or not. I guess some of your people would have to tell me that.
Right. I feel like it definitely is changing and different. Well, that's really interesting. Do you have any favorite stories that you've covered or really memorable moments?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about big time things, probably the most I've had the opportunity to cover a Super Bowl, Major League Baseball playoffs, NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs. Um, the local college here, North Dakota State University, has won 10 of the last 14 FCS football national championships. I've covered all of those. I've covered a couple of Final Fours, US Open golf. I've done all of those. And apparently I've been doing this a long time. I've had a pretty good career. But Roger Maris, the home run hitter with the New York Yankees, who hit 61 home runs in 1961 and
Okay.
remains to this day the biggest local individual sports hero in Fargo. In
Wow.
1998, Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa were chasing down the number 61, and the Forum sent me down to St. Louis for a series in, gosh, was it September, I suppose, when the Cubs were playing the Cardinals, and both Sosa and McGuire had a chance to break Roger Maris's record during that series. And I was standing just a few rows behind home plate when Mark McGuire hit number 62 and broke
Oh,
Roger
wow.
Maris's record. And I was in Busch Stadium. And so I was able to, at the time, it was a long time ago now, but at the time, and all the stuff that's come out after it with steroids and all of those things, it's a whole
Yeah.
different story today than it was when I covered it. But that was just the biggest, most famous story I've probably ever covered, and it had a local angle too that was just huge here in Fargo, because Roger Maris is, there are still things named after Roger Maris in town. He still, like I said, he still remains the biggest sports hero in probably in North Dakota history and state history. And so for me to be able to cover that, and I guess sadly see his record broken was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. You said you covered a Super Bowl. Which one?
The one that was in Minneapolis in
Okay.
2017 or 2018, I don't remember which one.
Okay.
But the quarterback for the Eagles who started that year was Carson Wentz, who
Hmm.
played football at North Dakota State here in Fargo. And so there was a connection there. He didn't play because he was injured, but I was credentialed and covered the Super Bowl, which it's one of those things that you want to do, I guess, in a small market like Fargo. But I've now covered one, and that's plenty. I saw what I needed to see.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because I know the Vikings have had really good like past couple seasons. Um, and
Yes, but you
then
have to understand, though. Again, I'm old, and so I saw the Vikings. I wasn't there, but I saw them on television play in four Super Bowls and lose all of them, and
oh,
they have not been back since 1977 or something. And so in Minnesota, I actually live in Minnesota, and I'm from Minnesota originally.
hmm.
So that's you're opening wounds, Catherine, by talking about the Vikings being so
Well,
good the last couple of years because
I'm a Bengals
because
fan. It's the same thing. They were so close. They've always been so
that's
close.
true.
It's
Joe
painful.
Burrow, Joe Burrow, by the way, went to elementary school in Fargo
Really?
because his dad was an assistant coach at North Dakota State at the time.
I did
So
not know that.
so when Joe Burrow was in the Super Bowl, whenever that was a few years ago, we were actually talking to his former teachers here in Fargo. So
That's
the
so
the
cool.
the localization of sports never ends. But yeah, Joe Burrow I think was it Liberty Elementary School? I think here in Fargo. He was actually a little student
Okay.
way back in the day
Oh,
here in Fargo.
but then I think they moved, right? Because did he grow up in Columbus or he
Yes,
just
yeah. His dad
okay.
moved on to his dad was a
Okay.
lifetime coach, and so he just kind
Yeah.
of lived that nomadic lifestyle. And
That's so
uh,
interesting. What a fun
yeah,
fact.
yeah. Now you know.
Um, let's see. Do you have any other like fun stories or special moments? Any like smaller scale things? I don't know. Just
Well, yeah. I
anything
mean,
fun.
what one story that I tell, and it's like a lot of people in this business at my age. I started off working on the desk, and then I worked my way up to being a high school writer, and then a small college writer, and then I was able to kind of go from there to because of our proximity to the Twin Cities. I've been to spring training with the Twins many times, and I've done
Mhm.
a bunch of those things. But when you're doing high school type stories, those are still the lifeblood of newspapers on the local level. I know that a
Mhm.
lot of the guys who've won awards nationally, and certainly the national sports writer and sports broadcasters of the year are those big time guys who do the Masters and they broadcast the Super Bowl. But the lifeblood for us is still high school sports. And so there's always stories there where you enjoy talking with high school kids and parents and coaches, because it's just so much different than it is trying to
Mhm.
cover a Super Bowl or a Final Four. But one story I like to tell is there was a longtime track coach in our neighboring city, Moorhead, who retired and had long since been retired. But he found out that that my dad was a World War II veteran, and so he said, "Hey, let's go out to lunch sometime, and I'll tell you about my experiences." I said, "Oh, okay." And so we went to lunch at a Perkins type of place,
Okay.
and he brought a bunch of books with him, and it was his scrapbooks from when he was um, in World War II. And it turns out that he was a medic and was on a medical ship
Oh,
for
cool.
both D-Day and the invasion of Iwo Jima.
Oh my gosh.
And so, if anybody knows World War II history, of course, D-Day is June 6th, and Iwo Jima is where
Yeah.
the Allies and the Americans went ashore on the island to fight the Japanese. And he told me all these stories and showed me all of his scrapbooks and some of his medals and things like that. And I wrote a story about it. And I saw his son, who was a grown man at 50 some years old at the time. His son told me that his family knew nothing about this. That
What?
he said his dad was just because of World War II veterans were reticent often to talk about their experiences. They didn't make a big deal out of it. They didn't come back here
Yeah.
and say, here's what I did in the war. They kept things pretty
Hmm.
much under their hats and just sort of went on with life and started families and got jobs and coached high school track for 40 years or whatever it was. And Shocky's son said, we knew none of this. We knew that he was in World War II, of course, but we didn't know really any of the details. And
Oh my
so I,
gosh.
and so I, he said, thank you for telling the story, because we learned
Yeah.
about it too, just by reading your column or reading your story.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
that was a meaningful one to me, because I had no idea that they didn't know. I mean, I wasn't trying to, expose some of their family secrets. I just was telling the story about this man who had an incredible life. And as it turned out, his family didn't know anything about it. And I was able to share that not only with the world, but with his family as well.
That's really special. Um, so what would you say is like the most rewarding part of your job? Like just probably going off of that, like sharing people's stories
Yeah,
and
I think it's still, and my role now is I'm a sports columnist, yes, but I also dabble on the news side of things and the opinion. I'm kind of become a strong opinion writer, but still, those are fine, and
Mhm.
opinions are what they are, and um, I have a readership and all these different things, but still, the most fun, and I hope it is for every sports writer, the most fun is still telling stories and sitting down and talking with people and meeting new
Mhm.
people and learning their stories and maybe sharing my stories that I know with them. I think that's still the best part of the job is.
Yeah.
And I think, frankly, I've gotten away from that somewhat, and maybe it needs to be revisited, but that's just talking with people and learning their stories and letting them tell their stories. And I've always found it amazing. And I found this amazing from the time that I graduated college and got out into the world. But I still find it amazing that people are willing to allow a stranger into their life and trust them enough to tell their story.
Yeah.
And then obviously we hope we are accurate and get it right and we tell the story in the proper context and all those different things. But I still find it amazing that people are willing to sit down and say, I really don't know you, and you just called me out of the blue to talk to me, but
Yeah.
I'd love to sit down with you over a cup of coffee and tell you my story. And then to be able to tell that story is still, I just find that amazing. It's incredible.
I agree. That is really special. Um, Finally, my last question. Do you have any advice for students or young professionals looking to enter the sports writing or the sports media world?
Yeah, be willing to do anything. Like I said, not to be the back in my day guy, but I'll say it. Back in
Yeah.
my day, um, I got a job here at the Forum when I was a college student at Morehead State, and whatever, it was $3 an hour or 2.75 or whatever the minimum wage was back then. But I did everything. I took phone calls from coaches. I um, you know took box scores. I typed in agate. I got reams of paper like this that were track meet results. And when the slot guy said, I need those track results in 45 minutes to get in the agate section of the paper, I was typing in and doing all those things. And I worked nights, I worked weekends, and all of those things. But the experience was invaluable to do all those things. And I know that, again, we're not in that same world anymore where maybe some of those things aren't done that way or not done a certain way.
Hmm.
But to maybe move it forward to today, it's, just be willing to do whatever is asked of you. I know a lot of young people today who their goal is to be on ESPN, and that's great. But what have you done to get there to be on
Right.
ESPN? Have you gone out and have you covered a high school game and kept your own stats, and maybe in some cases shot your own photographs and had to do all those things? Whatever the modern
Right.
iteration of newspapers is, whether it's online or it's still the printed paper, just be willing to do whatever needs to be done. And 99% of life is showing up. And I tell young people that all the time, is just be there, be dependable. If your boss or somebody who's
Hmm.
willing to give you an opportunity says, I need you to work Friday night at 8 o'clock, don't say, well, I had plans. Say, okay, well then, yeah, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And if you do that in today's world, you're going to go places. You might end up on ESPN, but you can't go. I don't think not many people can go from A to ESPN in one fell swoop without maybe filling in some of the blanks in between.
Hmm. I agree. That's really good advice. Just having the hard work, the mindset, and then just like the willingness to do that.
You
I
would be
completely
amazed,
agree.
and I know a lot of business owners, and I know a lot of people who are in different professions, and I'm telling you, young people, show up. Just show up.
Hmm.
Be dependable. Be there, and you will
Yeah,
go places. It's really true. I mean, just be there, and you'll have a foot in the door before anybody else.
that's really good advice. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was wonderful. It was so nice to meet you.
Yes, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Of course, and congratulations on winning.
Thank you. I'm very happy. I'm very pleased.
Bye.